I watched the film today. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of really great, really sort of just a film that had so much nuance in it in a time where nothing has nuance.
Yeah.
So I
Yes, it's rare nowadays.
yeah.
Yeah, and it needed that because it's such it's obviously such a potentially combustible issue, and so I think the only way to approach something like that, a story like the one Daniel's telling, is with nuance. So I'm glad that resonated.
Yeah, because I sort of get started really by asking about, it is one of those things where when you kind of read the kind of the synopsis of a page, one of your first reactions is to go like that, because it does feel like very delicate territory at the moment. They're kind of, and sort of, and everyone's sort of walking on eggshells. I just wondered about how, when you first got that screenplay, what made you think, actually, no, this is being tackled completely well. I like it doesn't vilify anyone. It kind of manages to stay very kind of backwards and let everyone kind of have their say. And I just wondered how was it through conversations, or was it the screenplay that made you confident that would be the case?
Well, it was both. It was mostly the screenplay because it's all in there. I mean, it's all very, as you said, balanced, and that was clear upon reading it, that it was all very fair. It didn't feel like it veered too far into any clear agenda direction. It wasn't at all political, and that's quite a feat. Nowadays, especially with an issue like this, I felt like whoever wrote it had to have had some very personal experience with it, and was a very deft writer. Was had skills as a writer, and was able to balance all those things really effectively. And the dialogue itself felt very real. That's another thing that's usually the first thing that I that really turns me off a script, is when the dialogue just feels like it doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's just not natural. Oh God, it doesn't live in. I wish you could have seen what just happened. I'll be right back. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I was just spilled myself to water. Yeah, it was just really beautifully written, and as it turns out, it was a very personal story for Daniel. I know he went through something like that, and he's a very sensitive guy. I got to talk to him a little bit, and we were talking about the script, obviously, and but about many other things, about things that influenced him, and we had very similar sensibilities when it came to movies we loved, and relationships we've been in. We just really hit it off, and having done the movie with him, I came to find that to be even truer, that he's just such a really sensitive person. So he was very sensitive to all the potential problems that a movie like that can suffer, certainly politically.
Yeah, because I know obviously it is, like we said, sort of delicate subject matter. So I'm just wondering if it's almost been hard to discuss. I mean, even though it is a very worthwhile conversation, and it's opening up a very pertinent dialogue, I think. Do you even feel that even doing interviews, you still have to kind of tread carefully when you talk about it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's been about a year since we've done this, because it came out in the States previous November. But I remember there were a few, and some people going into the interview were very clearly negatively affected by it, I remember. And so all their questions were had that kind of slant, were colored by that, by their experience with the movie, which is fine. I mean, I think a movie like this is bound to turn off some people, and people are bound to be offended by things. I think I think that's going to happen with no matter how delicate you handle the subject matter. Just the fact that the subject matter exists in the movie is going to be something that people are not going to or will be bothered by. So yeah, it's been tricky to talk about, and again, that's why I think Dan's script was such a feat, is that he is able to unpack it in the movie in a way that I don't think alienates anybody, but I also don't have the experience that a lot of people have, and it's been really interesting hearing people's negative reactions to the movie. It's been really educational and interesting, and not people who are coming at it from, you know, emotionally and are so turned off that they're just angry about it. But we did a lot of Q&As for the movie. We played at a bunch of film festivals, and I really loved hearing people's reactions to it, good or bad. And I know Dan did too. He's a very, again, like he's one of those guys that really wants to grow, wants to be better and learn. And so hopefully the movie sparks some of those conversations and creates a dialogue, you know.
Yeah, because it's interesting, because I saw the scene at the start, the one that kind of kickstarts everything that eventually goes on to happen in the classroom. And in the moment, I didn't see an awful lot wrong with it. And I actually remember finding an element of injustice for your character and then I the whole way through, because I got so caught up in the teacher's passion in that moment and his enthusiasm. I could see the naivety, but I could see the lack of harm he intended. But then when the student later on explained what made her uncomfortable, I went, oh shit, actually, yeah, I can see that that maybe it was bad. So it kind of shows the value of listening in some ways, doesn't it, to people?
Absolutely. You know, I this is going to be difficult to talk about without being specific, so it's going to sound really cryptic, but I really can't be specific. But I had an experience once where I made a comment to somebody that they interpreted as being racist, and it was about a completely different thing. It was, again, I mean, this is one of those things that's going to be hard to talk about just because I can't really be specific, and for the sake of the person in the story as well as my own, but they were very offended and really upset, and they then gave me the opportunity to explain what it was, and it was really, it came down to something as silly as like semantics, and a word that I had used that they thought was again, I have to be cryptic, but what was really interesting about that experience was just how two people with good intentions can be on such vastly different pages, and it required sitting down and looking at one another and a dialogue. It required a dialogue, and afterwards we were great. I mean, it was actually like we were better than we had been, you know, before this misunderstanding. And so I think about that often, and I think about it in the context of this movie and how important it is to look somebody in the face and express yourself in a measured, rational way, and how that is a form of communication that is becoming increasingly rare, you know, because we are, and I'm guilty of the same thing. We're on social media and we do a lot of communicating that way, and it creates these filter bubbles, and it is, it's unfortunate, but I think that's, to your point, that opening scene, I remember reading it and thinking, yeah, and I think a similar thing happened to Daniel, which was the impetus for the screenplay, but I remember having the same reaction, but I hadn't lived in that girl's shoes, in that character's shoes, and I reference for the experiences she had, and I think once she expressed that to me, I love that scene where she was finally able to say her piece. And again, we just never know people's histories, and I think if this time has taught me anything, it's to be a lot more sensitive and respectful when it comes to honoring people's histories and people's experiences. And yeah, I've been very lucky. I've lived a very lucky, privileged life, and but this girl was hurt. This girl had been hurt, you know. I mean, really hurt in a way that I just couldn't relate to. So it's a matter of, for the character, it was a matter of seeing beyond his own experiences and being truly compassionate, empathetic.
Yeah. Well, I reminds me when during the beginning of the year, when a lot of the kind of the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff were taking place, one of the memes I saw, one of the lines which was shared from some of my friends, said, "I understand that I don't understand." And in some ways, it's okay to admit that sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes it's all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
but
know?
how much do you think social media has to? We're talking about the kind of lack of nuance. And I found myself sometimes on social media, I'll be having a kind of conversation with someone and find that I'm representing we'll have maybe like a debate of something, and we're both kind of arguing something, and I sort of look at the argument and think I don't even feel strongly about the thing I'm arguing, and you kind of, it's so easy to fall into a camp, isn't it, on social media?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered about how, if you think the
How
lack of nuance
becomes.
yeah, and that lack of nuance we touched upon at the beginning. Do you think the social media has played a big part in that, in the way it's sort of missing from society in some ways?
Oh, I can't see how it hasn't. Yeah, I mean, it has to have played an enormous part. I mean, I've noticed when I read people's comments and stuff, it's very rare to, and sometimes you see it, but sometimes I'll read people going at each other, and it's so rare when there's any kind of like give and take, and any kind of progress within those little splinter arguments, and again, I think a lot of that has to do with the reality of being removed physically from somebody. I think when you're in front of somebody, when you can sense their energy. I mean, that sounds like new agey and bullshitty, but when you can just hear them and smell them, and you can take them in, and you can see their eyes. I mean, you can make out the details of I think that that goes a long way when you can sense where a certain comment is coming from. And of course, all of that is lost with social media. And I think people also just really love to express their anger and express fear. And those are things that really, those are things that are shared. And those are things that people seem to really gravitate toward on social media. And so there's an incredible podcast called Rabbit Hole. I don't know if you've heard this. It's a New York Times. It's fascinating. It's really about how so many people are becoming so radicalized on social media, on YouTube, and how the algorithm was set up anyway to push people one way or the other, because the videos that they're suggesting, and I found myself, I found myself just feeling a little bit more depressed the longer I spend on social media. I've felt it, it affect my mental health, and so I limit myself now, and I certainly don't read. It's reading comments is not good, and there's certain things that you can do to avoid it. But I remember back in the day, it was when that didn't exist. It was, I remember being in certain relationships where it was out in the press and stuff, and people would say, well, how did you handle that? And I just didn't look at it. It was so easy. I was only aware of it when you'd see a camera person or something, or paparazzi. But in terms of it being in the social, now if that happened, I'm sure I'd see it on Instagram, or I'd see it, so I feel for those people who are in relationships now, for those famous people. But it's a different world.
Yeah. No, it's funny though, because I mean, obviously I'm not, anyway, my profile's not particularly high, so I don't sort of get too much of it. But I sort of did an interview recently, and one of the comments just said underneath something like, "This is a really crap interview." And it's just one of those things you just go, all right. People just type stuff, but because obviously you're in the public eye, you're in big movies, big properties. Is it something that, does it get easier? Do you find that after a while, it's crappy comments from trolls are things that you can just go, yeah, or do they always sting a little bit?
They always sting a little bit. I wish my skin were a little thicker. It should be, after all this time. I should be more calloused. No, the ones that don't really affect me are ones like, I mean, a crappy interview is one thing, but if somebody says, I've read ones where it's just like, things that I don't value as much about myself. Like if somebody said, oh, he's ugly, or he is, he's not funny, or I'm okay with how I look, and I think I'm relatively funny. But if like Larry David wrote, "Oh, he's not funny," it would really hurt. And if some woman I was attracted to wrote, "Oh, he's really ugly," those things would bother me. But when it comes from strangers, the one that I had to stop reading, the comments wise, were because I've been doing this podcast with my brother, and the podcast is it's different because it's not like an acting project where you can hide behind a character. People will say, "Oh, I didn't like this movie." I hear that all the time. "I didn't like this movie. I didn't like the character you played," and that doesn't bother me so much because I have enough confidence in what I do that again, if it came from a film critic or somebody with like higher status, I think it would bug me. But when they write about the podcast, "Oh, he's long-winded," or "he's full of himself," if it's something about the podcast that I take more personally because it's much closer to me. I mean, it's like saying I don't like you as a person, and that's a hard thing to hear.
Yeah.
But I've gotten better about it. Back in the day, it was, I also stopped reading movie reviews. Helped because movie reviews for me never got easy. Especially the older I got, in a way, it got more difficult because I found myself investing more in a performance and so caring more about acting and what I do. And so a bad review started to sting a little bit more. But what did you do when you read that crappy interview? "Oh, this is a crappy interview." Do you are you tempted to write back to the person?
Yeah, well, actually, it was it was. I mean, crappy. That was me being polite. It was actually.
Oh, it was really
stingy. But no, it was actually it was quite a few on the same one interview, and it turns out that the person I interviewed has quite a passionate fan base. And I went on other interviews of that person I interviewed, and it turns out a lot of people were saying the same things about every interview. They didn't. So I felt okay, but I was tempted to write something originally, but then I thought, you know what? That's kind of giving them what they want. I think I don't know.
That's the thing. It's always because I wish I could say I was stronger and haven't had those issues, but I've definitely been tempted to write. But yeah, that's fueling it. It's just giving. That's kind of the ultimate desire, I think, of somebody like that. It would be and provoke to the point where they get a response. Something funny happened when we were promoting. When we were promoting Safe Spaces in a festival in Florida, they wanted us to go to a cocktail party at some fancy yacht type restaurant, and the director and I and they had a little area for us, but for the most part, it was like a free for all, and there were people who had paid to, wealthy Floridians who were like hobnobbing with one another, and it was like a cocktail thing, and they were coming up to me. I had been told that it was you're just going to go there and they have a dinner for you, and we were starving. Dan and Brett so hungry. We were like, "Oh, we get a nice dinner or whatever at this fancy place." So we go, and it turns out it was it was kind of like a meet and greet thing, and it was fine. People were being nice, but I find that sometimes people, and I don't want to generalize, but sometimes wealthier people tend to be a bit more entitled and not quite as aware of, the room, not as adept at reading the room. So there was somebody who finally, we did a bunch of handshaking and hello, and we finally sat down. They brought us the food, and somebody tapped me on. No. They were right. I looked up, and this woman said, "Justin, come," like this, beckoned me. I'm not come. And I said, "Well, I've got food in my mouth." "Oh, what? I want you to meet my friends." And I looked over, and to her friend with the curls and like the drinks on the other end of the restaurant, right? So I'm like, and I want to please. I'm a pleaser. I don't want people to not like me. To a fault. So I was like, "Oh, can I just finish and then I'll come over?" And she goes, "I'm not kidding." "Okay," like that. Not happy, not happy with the answer, but okay. There's somebody who doesn't know very often. So it started to bug me, like the entitlement that I'm in the middle of. I didn't owe her anything. I didn't, and she didn't say anything nice. She wasn't even like, I liked your work, nothing. She was just, so I mean, we got kind of distracted by other things. And I couldn't bring myself to get up and walk across the restaurant and do a whole thing with her friends. I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'm 40 years old. I got to start drawing some boundaries. So I left the restaurant, and I think on the way out, I waved to the friends, hi. And because they were waving, hi, So I forget how I discovered this. I think it was my brother's girlfriend sent me somewhere this woman wrote a scathing, I think it was on Yelp or something. I forget where it was, on what forum, but it was this story. Oh, Twitter. I think it was Twitter. She tagged me in it. That's how I know. It was about how rude I was, and because I was there, I was going to see my grandmother that night, who was coming to the movie, and it was this big deal. And for me, and she said, I hope his grandmother should be ashamed of him, and really like personal, who raised him, things like that, like about my character. And the director was so upset, and he wanted me to tour, and I think I did, but I went down this deep hole, Stefan, where I similar to what you did. I found her on Yelp. She had written all these Yelp reviews that were some were about like really great restaurants with really good, but she gave them 1 star because they, and it was always something about how the waiter hadn't smiled at her enough, or they took an extra minutes to bring her check. It was these little nitpicky, I didn't get the thing in time. And in a way it made me feel a lot better, but it also it also amplified how this world that we live in now, everybody has a platform, and everybody has a place to put their anger, and some people's anger is very justified. You mentioned Black Lives Matter. I mean, like there's examples of it that are so beyond justified and noble even. And but then there are the Karens out there who just I'm angry and I'm gonna express it. And the things she said about me, and just because I didn't cross, I don't know, that to me is that social media becomes really scary and abusive, and I've tried to really limit my exposure to.
Yeah, but you mentioned that kind of anger online and stuff, and I was really interested because part of the conflict in safe spaces is generational. It's a potentially a naivety, but the scene with you and the sister in the restaurant, it's an inability in some ways to communicate with the younger generation or understand each other. And I was just wondering, because I'm sort of a lot closer to your age than I am to their age, so I was in that scene, I was very much siding with your character, thinking, God, it's so frustrating. But then that same anger that the younger generation is showing, they've got a voice, they're not afraid to use it. So even though it can be infuriating at times, it's pretty great, isn't it? Because I feel like we're in good hands. I feel like they're not going to take shit, this next generation.
I hope not, and I hope it's for causes that are really worth not taking shit for. I think they have a lot now. They're gonna have a lot to deal with, and sometimes I look at my net. They're such innocents now. They're 3 and 1, but I think about the global warming, the environmental issues they're going after, and automation and the loss of jobs. And I just think about how much they're going to have to deal with. And I'm glad that this generation is to use their voices, like you said, and they're not taking shit. And I just hope they use those voices for causes that are truly noble and important and justified. And I think they are. I mean, so far, I mean, the big one for me is the environment. I think about the marches that have been happening and the rallies that are going on, rallying around that cause. I think is really, it's been really. I'm hopeful. Really hopeful for the generation.
Yeah, I want to go back a moment because you mentioned that you took your grandmother to see the film with you. That must have been a really nice experience, considering obviously the themes within the movie. But yeah.
Well, it was Stefan, and it wasn't. I mean, as we were watching it, I thought, yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, well, it's about this guy's grandmother, and my grandmother means the one that I took to the movie means so much to me. There's another thing that I really loved about the script that I wanted to try and capture. That story to me was hit very close to home. I'm really close with her, and we have similar to the character in the movie. We have a kind of sassy, fun dynamic. But as I was watching it, it occurred to me that I had sort of forgotten about, the fact that character dies in the movie, and there's some morbid themes that it's exploring, and I was hoping that my grandmother wouldn't, I wouldn't depress her, and she, not that she's really prone to stuff like that, but as it turns out, she couldn't hear most of it. And we were joking about, that's the kind of relationship I have with her, that she was like, she'd say something like, "Oh, thanks a lot for taking me to a movie where the grandmother dies." We were joking about it afterwards, but I think she just liked seeing me on a big. That was always such a thrill for my family to see me on a big screen, that they showed it at a movie theater. So and for these small, and now especially, it's that doesn't happen anymore. So it was. I think she was just excited to see me in a very superficial way, and oh, you look handsome, and there's all that. Yeah, talk about being removed from this generation. I think that scene that you mentioned in the diner was probably, we talked a little bit about it, and she completely my character. I found that in fact, most of that audience did. It was mostly older people in Florida. South Florida. So I think, struggled to see the other side, the more millennial side of it. And I think that also is like, I think that's also due to really good casting. I think the actors who played those parts were so effective, and they were so real. And again, that's the difficult balancing act. Like, you don't want to make them too extreme. You don't want to make that. That's what Daniel was contending with. You don't want to make them too. You don't want to vilify them and make me heroic. And so the truth is, I didn't really know when to stop and listen. And that's, I think, that was a big lesson that my character needed to learn, was just kind of shut up and hear somebody out. Hear somebody's anger, hear somebody's pain, and then of course my sister was on. She turned out she was on drugs, and she was just, I think that's what was pushing her in that scene. She's so great too. But yeah, I agree. My instinct is yours, which is to side a little bit more with my character, because I always default, or I try to default to reason. And in that scene, my character was just trying to navigate that sticky situation with reason, I think.
Well, yeah, we talk about the importance and the value of listening. That does work both ways. They weren't listening to him in that situation. But
exactly.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, just quickly following on from that, you mentioned sort of your grandmother sort of siding, and the audience siding with your character in that scene. You said earlier that some people have been kind of vocally offended by the movies. Have you noticed the difference in reactions being quite dependent on age? Have you found that in regards to audience members who have loved it and those who have had problems?
Yes, yeah, but the one that I'm thinking of in particular, the one that seemed kind of, and I don't know, offended might be too strong a word. She was definitely she was defending certain points that she felt needed to be made, that we didn't make clearly enough. She was a reporter in Boston, and Yeah, she was. I mean, we had a really nice conversation, but I think she was just kind of put off by some of she was put off by my character. I know, and she told me that, and which I get. I mean, like she said she used words like, you know, he's very caustic and aggressive, and you know, there's no denying that. I think she was just, and who knows what her experience is with people like that. So she was bothered by my character's personality, I think, and but the audience that I mentioned, the mostly older audience, there were a few younger people there who also who didn't necessarily side with the younger characters in the movie. No, I mean, the truth is, I didn't see it with that many audiences. But that would be a better question for Daniel, because the director, because he went to a bunch of those festivals, and I think, yeah, it was more younger. I don't know, you know, I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it's also just politically, where do you lean? I don't know, how aware are you of how quote unquote woke you are. I think might have something to do with it.
Well, I suppose the good thing, I mean, look, it's great that we did so much to talk about it, isn't it? Like all these different opinions and stuff. It is, and we've been speaking about so many of the themes about the movie for so long. When I sit down to prepare questions, I had no problem today thinking of stuff to discuss and triggers of conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. That's nice to be a part of a story like that. That provokes any kind of conversation that's at all that advances any ideas, and the truth is that it's really grappling with a lot of different, you know, really big ideas, and yeah, I think that's rare. It's rare when it's handled in a nuanced way, like you said in the beginning, and again, that's all testament to Dan's script. I mean, and I think it being so personal, I think had that down without any frame of reference and tried to write this story, it would be a bit more, maybe a little bit more lopsided and not quite as subtle. But it was something that happened to him. So, and he had so much respect for the person on the other side, you know, the other person in this story. I think he came to really respect that side, and in fact, he was the one in a lot of these Q&As that was arguing on behalf of the more, let's call it, the more millennial approach to this issue. And the fact that again, like, I'm repeating myself, but we just don't know where people are coming from and what their experiences are, and that was the thing I found most valuable about the movie, because I was like you, I kind of sided, I was leaning more toward my character. I mean, I kind of had to as an actor, but that scene really hit the end, you know, and she was so good in that. I mean, you know, that's an example of, like, as an actor, you just try to get out of your own way. You just have to be present as possible. And that was such a perfect example where I had such a great scene partner that I got to just listen and absorb what this actress was doing. And she was so good, so good.
Yeah. So looking ahead to projects, because am I right in thinking, this is my trusty IMDb research, but you're co-directing again soon. You're doing Lady of the Manor, is that right?
Yes. I was just looking for a little sign. My brother and I, we made it together. We made it right. We finished principal shooting right before the lockdown happened. So it was right at the end of February, early March. And so in that sense, we got lucky. I hate using that word in the context of the pandemic, but yeah, we just put the final touches on it, and we're shopping it around. It's called Lady of the Manor. My brother and I were always really into odd couple comedies, and we loved buddy comedies growing up, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and movies like that. And so tried to make a low budget version of that. We got we got so lucky with the actors. Melanie Linsky and Judy Greer are the odd couple. And they could not have been better. I'm going to get emotional to talk about how much more they brought to it. yeah, I'm just forever grateful to them. But I can't wait for people to see it. Yeah, it's called Lady the Manor, and it's we tried to express a few ideas, but it's all masked by this kind of fun fart comedy.
Nice. Sounds right up my street, but my final question before I go as well is obviously playing Roboto in the Master of the Universe reboot animation series. Has that all been done now? And how excited are you for that to be released out there in the world? Because it must be so great to be involved in a kind of property of that nature that has such a big established fan base.
Well, yeah, Stefan, is it Stefan or Stefan?
Stefan, first one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Stefan would be more the O, right? F-O-N.
Yeah, it's called my grandpa's German, so it's the kind of more like German, like Stefan.
Oh, Stefan.
Yeah, well, yeah, officially.
Yeah. Yeah, my name was originally German. It was Lang. They anglicized it in the early. It's funny because somebody asked me that the other day, and I was funny. I'm looking at I got a picture of Kevin right here. I could not admire Kevin more. He's on my at my little office here. But and so he everything, even if it's a ridiculous stoner walrus movie, I jump at the chance. And so this was no different, but it wasn't the sacred property to me that it is to a lot of people. I probably shouldn't say that, but I wasn't a big He-Man. I wasn't a big He-Man guy, man. I wasn't a He-Man man. Boy, I Transformers was my thing. Transformers, like gummy bears. I mean, I loved cartoons, but for some reason I never got into He-Man. I don't know why. I know I shouldn't be saying that, but it was a really fun character to play. He was a really kind of to find human quality in that in the robotic nature of that character, the voice. Really fun. And we got to play. Right, that's the great thing about Kevin is like he just gives you every opportunity to play around and find a voice like that, and I never feel like constrained, or I didn't explore an idea. So that job was no different. And also just being in quarantine, doing an animated job, it's just so nice to be working at all. Is just really special. So I'm excited to see it. Script was really good. I remember thinking, God, this is going to be really funny and good for. I was never into He-Man, so I'll watch this one.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, and I probably shouldn't say this either, but no, I wasn't either, really. I wasn't a He-Man. I wasn't a He-Man man, so.
I like that it was, we're too, we don't want to offend.
Yeah.
We don't offend the He-men, women, the He non-binary. We don't want to offend any He people.
Yeah. So just very quickly before I do go, because obviously, this year was a bit mad from a sort of professional viewpoint, and obviously everything was a bit unprecedented. But how's 2021 looking for you? Have you got much lined up? Are you anticipating things kind of reverting back to a relative normal?
Well, how you guys are just got the vaccine, right? Or people are
so the vaccine's out there, but we've just done like lockdown again for the next.
That's right.
2 weeks. So at the moment it doesn't feel like we've made any progress.
I know. I was going to say
by like the spring, hopefully we'll start feeling the effects.
Similarly, I think that's what we're hearing. So it's I mean, of course, I'm just soaking up the good news whenever it comes. But so far it's all just kind of theoretical, and it doesn't feel real, of course, but it's nice to think about. It's so nice to think about that the change that's going to happen. And I live really close to my parents, so I have like a very selfish, immediate interest in the world changing, which is I just want my parents to be healthy and the older people in my life. But I am also really selfishly looking forward to going out to having a drink at an outdoor bar and watching a game, and the things that privileged people miss. But it's hard to complain at all about this time. if anything, it's just made me feel, I know this sounds like bullshit, but it's made me feel luckier. It's made me feel really lucky because I know how much more people are struggling, and so I'm excited for all of that to change. You know, I really am. I can't wait. So we'll see. I'm hopeful. I'm not planning any vacations just yet. I'm not planning any. I'm really excited to go back to work. I did a little job in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and with one of my heroes, one of my horror nerd icons, Greg Nicotero.
Oh, nice.
TV show called Creep Show. So that was fun to get back into that genre, which I love. So, but it also made me miss acting more than I thought I did. I was salivating to do more of it. So hopefully that'll open up, and yeah, we'll see and I'm excited for people to see this movie that we're going to start promoting. So hopefully maybe we can talk again about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, we should catch up again for Lady of the Manor when that sort of starts getting distribution and stuff. We should definitely catch up again. All right, just well, I'll pass across again soon. I'm sure. Have a nice rest of the day, and we'll catch up again.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.